In this video, you are going to learn how to factor polynomials by finding the greatest common factor. You've learned how to find the greatest common factor in middle school, but now we're going to use it when we're factoring polynomials. So the GCF, or your greatest common factor, is the greatest common divisor of two or more numbers. So it's the greatest number that I can divide into both. If I look at 16 and 24, my factors of 16 are 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. My factors of 24 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 12, and 24. The GCF is the biggest number that can go into both. So even though 1's going to both, 2's going to both, 4's going to both, the greatest number that go into both 16 and 24 are 8. So my GCF of 16 and 24 is 8. Sometimes you're going to get three numbers, 18, 27, and 9, and sometimes right off the bat you know in your head what number goes into all three. In case you don't, I'm just going to look at it the same way we looked at the first one, 18, 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18 go into all three. I'm sorry, go into just 18. 27 is 1, 3, 9, and 27. So we see right here the greatest common factor is 9 of those two. And when I look at 9, I have 1, 3, and 9. So my greatest common factor, because that's the biggest number that can divide into both, is 9. We're going to also see it with variables. X to the 5th really just means x times x times x times x times x. 5 x's. X squared really just means x times x. So we're trying to figure out the greatest number of x's we can divide out of both. The way to think about it is, I have one matching set here, I have another matching set here. I can't take any more x's out because there's none left in that x squared. So the greatest amount of x's I can take out is just x squared, x times x. And it's usually the smallest amount of x's you have when you're factoring a polynomial. Alright, so when we factor polynomials, we're going to use the reverse distribution property. So distribution meant we multiplied in, reversing it means we're going to divide evenly out. So we're going to find the GCF of the monomials 20x squared and 25x cubed. It'll be written like this as a polynomial expression. So the first step is to find the greatest common factor of the coefficients. So I'm only going to look at 20 and 25. The greatest common factor of 20 and 25 is 5. Now I'm going to look at the greatest common factor of the variables. So I'm only looking at x squared and x cubed. Remember, x squared is just x times x. X cubed is x times x times x. So the most I can take out of both, 1x, is only 2 x's because I can't take a third x out of x squared. So my GCF of the variables is x squared. So that means the greatest common factor of 20x squared plus 25x cubed is 5x squared, because I write them together. Now, I'm just going to take the expression I rewrote here, right here, and I am going to use reverse distribution. So I'm going to divide the 5x squared out of both. When I do that, that 5x squared is going to go in the front of the parentheses. 20 divided by 5 is 4. X squared divided by x squared leaves 1, because any number divided by itself is 1. 25 divided by 5 is 5. X cubed divided by x squared is x. Because 3 minus 2 is 1. And you learned about the property of exponents in a previous unit. I never need to write it as 4 times 1. So my final answer as I factor that expression is 5x squared times 4 plus 5x. Now if you want to check your work, you use the distributive property. So 5x squared times 4 is just 20x squared. 5x squared times 5x, 5 times 5 is 25. X squared times x is x cubed. Is that my original? And it is. So that's how you factor the GCF out of a polynomial. Let's try a few more examples together. I look at my number 1, 6x squared minus 24x. I'm going to look at my coefficients first. I'm sorry, that was the bell. The greatest common factor of 6 and negative 24 is 6, so I'm going to take a 6 out of both of the coefficients. I look at x squared and x. The greatest number I can take out of both of them is just x, because there's only one x I can take out of the x's. So that is what I'm going to divide each by. And the way I set it up reminds me that I'm going to divide. That's 6x I'm dividing by goes on the outside because it's reverse distribution. 6 divided by 6 is 1. X squared divided by x just leaves me an x to the first because 2 subtract 1 is 1. Negative 24 divided by 6 is negative 4. X divided by x just leaves a 1. And just like before, I don't really need to write that 1 there. So this is my final answer when I factor the expression. 6x times x, 6x squared, 6x times negative 4 is negative 24x. So I know I factored it correctly. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to look at my first two, my coefficients. The greatest common factor of 14 and 35 is 7. Greatest common factor of x squared and x is just x. And I write it like this to remind myself I'm going to divide it out. 7x goes on the outside. 14 divided by 7 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Negative 35 divided by 7 leaves a negative 5. X divided by x is 1. And just like I showed here, I don't need to rewrite it, so I'm just going to leave it as 5. So 7x times 2x minus 5. If I look at my third example, 5x squared plus x, my coefficients are 5 and 1, so my greatest common coefficient is just 1. I don't need to rewrite it. X squared and x, the greatest common factor is just x, so I'm going to pull an x out. 5 divided by 1 is 5x, and then x divided by x is 1. I need that placeholder. I need to put 1 there. So that is my final answer. Now let's look at number 4 together. 2x squared plus 14x plus 6. There are 3 terms this time. I'm going to look at all 3. Look at the coefficients first, which are 2, 14, and 6. The greatest common factor of those 3 numbers is 2. Now I look at the x squared, the x, and because there is nothing connected to the 6, I can't take any x's out. So let me say that again. Because there is no x connected to the 6, I cannot take any x's out. Whenever that happens, do not try to take a variable out. There's no variables here that you can take from. So 2 on the outside. X squared, 14 divided by 2 is 7x, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And that is my factored 4. I'm going to jump down to number 7. Go ahead, pause the video, try it yourself. I do want to go through these examples for you because factoring is super important throughout your math career in high school and if you continue on in college or whatever your career may be. So please pay attention and please make sure you are noticing everything that is occurring. We have 3x cubed, negative 6x squared, and plus 5x. Going to put a division sign underneath all 3 terms. 3, negative 6, and 5. I can't take anything out of my coefficients, so that would just be 1, x cubed, x squared, and x. So unlike the one up here, my 5 has an x connected to it. So the most x's I can take out of all 3 is just 1x, because there's only an x here. 3x squared, I'm taking 1x out of all of them, minus 6x, and 5x divided by x is just 5. Final answer. Alright, now we're getting into the business. There is more than one variable, but we're still going to do it the same exact way. Looking at my first set of terms and my second. So, we look at 3 and 15, I'm sorry. The greatest common factor of 3 and 15 is 3. So I'm going to take a 3 out of those. I then am only going to look at the x to the 4th and the x cubed. The most x's I can take out of both is x cubed. So I'm taking an x cubed out of both. Then I look at the y squared and the y cubed. The most y's I can take out of both is 2. So y squared comes out. Oop, but I forgot to write the x cubed there. So I'm taking out a 3x cubed, y squared. 3 divided by 3 is just 1. X to the 4th divided by x cubed is just an x. Y squared divided by y squared is just 1. So again, you would have a 1 here and a 1 here, but you don't need those placeholders right now since we have an x. 15 divided by 3 is 5. X cubed divided by x cubed is just 1. Y cubed divided by y squared is y. Leaving that as my final answer. Go ahead, pause the video, try the last one here by yourself, and then we're going to look at the last set of examples together. So I look at 9 and negative 3. I can take a 3 out of both of those. I have an x to the 7th and an x squared. Most I can take out is that x squared. Y to the 5th and y to the 6th. The most y's I can take out is y to the 5th. So I'm taking that GCF out of both. 9 divided by 3 is 3. X to the 7th divided by x squared is x to the 5th, 7 minus 2. Y to the 5th divided by y to the 5th leaves me 1, but I don't need to write that since I already have 3x squared there. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. X squared divided by x squared is just 1. Y to the 6th divided by y to the 5th just leaves a y. And again, I really don't need these ones here because the y is my placeholder. So I have 3x to the 5th minus 1y. Alright, the last part is very important. If the leading coefficient is negative, you always need to factor the negative out. Meaning your GCF, when your leading term is negative, will always be a negative something. Maybe negative 1, negative 5, whatever it may be. But the negative always has to pop out. So when we look here, negative x squared plus 5x minus 6, I can't take any x's out, and my GCF would be technically 1, but because of that negative there, I'm pulling the negative 1 out. Which means 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5x. Negative 6 divided by negative 1 is a positive 6. So you can write it like that, or like that. We should always pull the negative out. Same thing for the second one. My leading term is a negative 2m to the 4th, so I definitely need to take a negative out. I'm going to look at the rest of the factors. Negative 2, 14, and negative 6. I can take a 2 out of all those. And I look at the m's. M to the 4th, m squared, and m. The most m's I can take out is just 1m since that's all I have in the last term. So negative 2m is my GCF. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. M cubed. 14 divided by 2 is negative 7m. Negative 6 divided by 2 is a positive 3, and the m is just 1. That is your factored form. Same thing for the last one. Because my leading term here is a negative, I need to take the negative out of both. Look at negative 5 and 35. The most I can take out of those is negative 5. X squared and x, I can take an x out. And then I can take y's out. My greatest common factor is negative 5xy. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1. X squared divided by x is x. Y divided by y is 1. 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. X divided by x is 1. Y divided by y is 1. Leaving my final answer as x. Negative 7 times 1 times 1 is just negative 7. That's my final answer. Let me know if you have any questions.